We've got Michael Hetrick, as I said, playing Rug Pod, against Geno here playing Red-Green Aggro. So what do you kind of expect out of this matchup?
Well, let's get some deck list over here. I'll take Perales' deck here. His deck seems fairly straightforward. He has 2 Hound of Grizzlebrand, which I guess is a little outside the box, 2 copies of Rancor, a red-white sword, and 2 green-black swords for creature augmentation, and then 4 copies of Green Sun Zenith, a Thrag Tusk, and then a Sig Slime for utility, and then your general suite of good green guys. So,
and I mean, if you guys have followed Michael Hetrick at all, you know he's been playing Rug Pod for a while now. So it's a standard Rug Pod deck. He's found a way to find room for a Viridian Corruptor. He's got Deceiver, Exarch, Metamorph, Zealous Conscripts, that Thrag Tusk, all that stuff. So it's a standard list. Nothing too crazy being changed here. But you'll see on turn 2, Hetrick has a Strangleroot Geist. He's in for 2 against Geno, and Geno is going to follow up with a Strangleroot Geist of his own. So the Geist beats are already off and running. We don't have a very good look at their hands right now. I do see that Hetrick has a Birthing Pod in his hand, which is one of the key cards in this matchup. Obviously, the card advantage that Birthing Pod provides is very difficult to overcome if you don't have Birthing Pod in your own deck.
Especially the card advantage and the flexibility is very difficult. Very difficult to beat. I've very rarely seen active Pod defeated.
Yes, especially in the Green Mirrors. I mean, Pod is probably the most important card in the Green Mirrors. And you see Hetrick's going to pay the 2 life to get this into play. The 3s he can move up to. He's got Borderland Ranger, he has Deceiver Exarch, he has Viridian Corruptor. His 3s aren't, they aren't anything, especially exciting. You're not going to find Blaze Splasher here or anything like that. But I mean, just getting Strangleroot Geist into a 3/2 and then just getting value out of that card is probably more than enough.
Yep. So Perales does have the a Sig Slime in his deck that he can either draw or Zenith for. So he could potentially get out of this kind of fast, but he's definitely under the gun to either kill Hetrick or break up his Pod very fast.
Yeah, I mean, you can't leave, as you said, you can't leave Pod unanswered. If the card advantage gets out of control too quickly, I mean, basically 2 activations of the card is too much to overcome. So we see no attack with Geno here. He's just probably going to want to trade his Strangleroot Geist for the other Strangleroot Geist so it doesn't get maximum value. So we'll see what Michael does.
Hetrick's hand is actually quite bad. Besides, I think he has a Thrag Tusk and basically just lands, so he can't actually leverage this too overwhelmingly just yet.
And I mean, if that's the case, if his hand is kind of blank, I don't see him trading a Strangleroot Geist for a counter on the other Strangleroot Geist or anything like that. He's probably just going to try to get 2 activations off of it.
Yeah, he needs to maximize his cards here. He can't be just trading damage like that. So he's going to Pod up.
We'll see what this one's going to get. I wouldn't be surprised if this was Exarch here. Exarch in untapping Pod, getting a 4-drop.
Yeah, certainly getting Borderline Ranger when he's flooding out here is not that attractive. Yeah, so we'll get the Exarch.
And the 4s in his deck are Huntmaster of the Fells. He has 4 of those, of course, and then he has a Phyrexian Metamorph as well. So I would assume that we're going to see a Huntmaster of the Fells enter play, but stranger things have happened. I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. All right, there's a Lumberjack. So he's going to get a 2/2 Wolf here. I think we can agree that we don't like attacking here with the Geist?
No way. Not with him flooding out. If his hand had more action in it, I could see making an attack, but also that Strangleroot Geist on Perales' side of the board against the Huntmaster and the token doesn't do very much, so I wouldn't let him cash it in for any amount of value. It's just...
Yeah, and that makes sense. Looking at Geno's list, I know you have it in front of you. How many bonfires does he have access to?
He
has 3. Okay.
Which is also a way that he can possibly break out of...
And you're going to see the Huntmaster flip here because no spells were actually cast. He sacked Strangleroot Geist. Deceiver Exarch came into play, untapped Pod, and then he sacked that to get Huntmaster. So no spells were actually played, so that's why the bird is going to die.
Pretty awesome interaction between Birthing Pod and Huntmaster.
Crazy good interaction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Geno is behind right now. Strangleroot Geist is doing a decent job of holding off attackers and that sort of thing. 4/4 Huntmaster is still going to be... 4/4 flipped Huntmaster is still going to be pretty difficult to deal with. No action from Geno this turn either.
Yeah, I wish we could get a better view of his hand here because I don't really imagine what he could be sitting on.
Taking a decent look at Michael's hand, there's a Kessig Wolf Run in his hand. He also just drew another Huntmaster of the Fells, and I mean, with him being able to play Huntmaster and activate Pod for 2 life, and the 2 life that he gains from Huntmaster pretty much negating that, he's going to be able to get into the 5 range now. And his 5s in his deck are Zealous Conscripts, Thrag Tusk, which is in his hand, and then Wolfir Silverheart, which is, I think you would agree, one of the most important cards in Green Mirrors.
Yeah, for sure. And basically, Perales needs to get himself in the position where Bonfire of the Dam is still actually a live draw for him. Once that window's closed, there's no hope of him getting out from here.
Yeah, there's no comeback in sight. And if Mr. Hetrick is going to search for Wolfir Silverheart like I believe he's going to, and there's the big bad wolf himself, Geno's in some trouble.
Yeah, that closes that door.
Yeah.
Now Bonfire isn't even enough to get him out.
Yeah.
So.
The Bonfire window is basically closed. He had a turn to draw last turn where it would have been reasonable. You know, it would have killed his guy. It would have killed Hetrick's Geist and his Wolf. Wouldn't have killed his Huntmaster, but it would have been a reasonable draw to get him back in the game.
Yeah. And it would have also broken up his chain for the time being because you can't pod up off of the
full Huntmaster.
Right.
Yeah.
Hetrick still had the Thrag Tusk left over in his hand, so he would have been able to rebuild from there, but it would have at least slowed him down for a little bit.
It would have given Geno a little bit of hope to get back into the game.
Right. Running Bonfire draws or the acidic slime might have been it might have been enough for him to claw back in, but now things are out of control.
Yeah. He's behind now. I mean, I'm not really sure what draws he has available to him to get back in this game. Typically, this is the kind of spot where Bonfire kind of pulls you back into games when you miracle it, but as you said, I mean, Silverheart being an 8/8 and giving +4/+4 to something is just too slow. He probably has a Silverheart of his own here. Okay.
Oh, he has a slime, so that is something at least. I think the Wolf Run in Hetrick's hand is ultimately going to be too much on this attack, but in theory, the slime does hold back some of his attacks because he doesn't want to obviously trade his Silverheart for it. But the trample land represents. Oh no, we're just getting a
That's
concession.
Just a concession. Okay, sure. The trample land, obviously, Hetrick did a nice job of slow rolling that.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the last line. That's the last line that you want to play, ideally, so that you can get the maximum effect out of it. And that's basically what was going to happen in that game.
And the information is significant too. You
of course.
You don't want.
Geno has no idea that he has that in his deck right now, which is important. Looking at Michael's sideboard for this sort of matchup. And I'm a big proponent of red-green, as you guys may know at home. I mean, he's got 3 Art Trails here, which is a really important card in the Green Mirrors. Being able to control the 8-mana Accelerants is a really, really big deal because you don't want to get behind very quickly. You're also going to find 2 Bonfire of the Damned in Michael's deck list, and we've already gone over how important that is, but if you guys have ever played or miracled Bonfire of the Damned in Green Mirrors, you guys obviously probably know how important that card is as well.
What do you think the relationship is between miracling it and winning the game? What's the percentage correlation?
The correlation is probably fairly high. I don't want to say
90 something,
95, 96. I don't want to go 100. You're going to find another Wolfir Silverheart, so he's going to have access to 2 after sideboard. 2 more Zealous Conscripts is going to bring him up to 3. And there's another Borderland Ranger in his sideboard. And when you're on the draw and it's about hitting land drops, I could see him boarding that in on the draw. So he's definitely got some options available to him. Hetrick also has an Ancient Grudge, which I don't think he's going to find use of, and 3 Hell Riders as well, which just aren't that impressive in Green Mirrors. It's more for the control matchup. So,
on the other side of the table, we have 2 copies of Ancient Grudge you may want to fight over Birthing Pod, although that's always sort of a dubious way of trying to fight it. 1 copy of Thundermaw Hellkite, which I assume is quite good here.
Good in Green Mirrors, for sure.
Zealous Conscript, also potentially very good here. I mean, he has a lot of different kind of big utility guys that he can bring in. Another Silverheart. I'm not exactly sure what distribution of big guys that he wants to have here is. But, I mean, Thrag Tusk seems very bad in this matchup because Hetrick is so good at just clogging up the board. And Hetrick's deck is also so much better at going over the top that Geno just needs to play a fast beatdown game. He can't try to attrition down the ground.
He just needs to get him dead as fast as he can, because the longer the game goes, the more gummed up the board gets, and then that's when Pod starts to get its advantages.
Yeah.
And then he's going to be too far behind because Hetrick has more card advantage in his deck, and Geno's deck is more aggressive. He has Rancors, as you said. He has Hound of Gristlebrand, that sort of thing. So he needs to be the aggressor in the sideboard games and try to just get the games over as fast as he can.
Cool. And oddly enough, I actually think Rancor Rancor actually might be dubious in this matchup for the same reason that Hetrick's just so good at clogging up the ground that it might not, like you might be better off just trying to stick a sword on something, which is going to be a little bit harder for Hetrick to fight through.
Sure.
But
I mean, it's kind of interesting because like I can see spots where Rancor is bad. I can also see spots where Rancor is fairly good.
Yeah, it's definitely swingy here.
I mean, a card like Hound of Gristlebrand is a card that obviously wants to carry a Rancor.
Yes.
And he has another one in his sideboard, so I mean that card alone it's fairly good in Green Mirrors. You know, with the interaction with Kessig Wolfrun, interaction with Wolfir Silverheart, interaction with Rancor, makes it a pretty reasonable threat. But there are times where Rancor is going to be fantastic, and there are other times, as you said, where it's going to be below average.
Yeah. So I would actually be I mean, Rancor's raw power level is so high that I would be surprised if he actually cut them on the play. But I can see on the draw just not being the type of...
Not being anywhere near as good.
Yeah, the odds that the game actually breaks correctly where Rancor's appreciably adding to your clock probably only occurs in games where Hetrick's draw is quite bad. And, you know, that's a common dilemma with sideboarding or whatever that I see a lot of players encounter is, you know, when this card is going to be good? Is it only in circumstances where my opponent's draw is bad?
Sure.
And I don't need to enhance my draws that much when my opponent's draw is bad. What I need to do is have cards that are going to be good when my opponent's draw is average or better. Okay. And Rancor on the draw probably doesn't meet that qualification, I would guess.
I would agree with your point as well. Now you brought up the point just a minute ago about Ancient Grudge coming in to deal with Birthing Pod. Now I've never been a big proponent of boarding in Ancient Grudge against just the card Birthing Pod because, you know, if he doesn't draw Birthing Pod, then I've essentially mulliganed. Whereas if he's drawn Birthing Pod, my card is fantastic, but it's very dependent on him drawing it because there aren't a lot of targets in his deck. He has 4 Birthing Pods, and then he has a Phyrexian Metamorph. Those are the only targets.
Yep.
So how do you feel, like, from a sideboarding aspect of boarding in a narrow card like Ancient Grudge that's only good against a certain card in his deck? Now, obviously, Birthing Pod's one of the most powerful cards in his deck, but it's not. He doesn't need it to win.
I generally speaking, if I'm an aggressive deck, I do not like setting in cards that are purely reactive and do not cover a large swath of their cards. In general, the way the stars have to align for it to be good, it looks like Perales here is taking a mulligan.
Yes.
Is not only do you have to draw the Grudge and he has to draw the Birthing Pod, but you actually have a very small window for that to even occur. Because if he pods for 2 turns and then you rip your Grudge, you're probably still buried by what happened in the 2 turns previous. Also, Hetrick's deck has the possibility of winning without Birthing Pod. You can just start casting his big guys.
Sure.
And can just ramp up into his big guys. So I would not want to have Ancient Grudge in my deck here.
Okay.
Even though you are going to lose some percentage of games to Birthing Pod, where maybe you don't lose that specific game if you were able to Grudge it right away. I think in total sum, the cost of drawing a dead card, drawing it but it doesn't matter, I think that percentage of games is much higher than the percentage of games where you draw a Grudge and it's perfect for the spot that you're in.
Sure. And as we talked about, you know, from Geno's perspective and what he needs to accomplish in this matchup is he needs to be aggressive as possible. So by diluting his deck with a card like Ancient Grudge to be reactive is probably not going to facilitate his game plan, so he can't afford to do it. They're both going to 6 here. Looking at Michael's deck list just really quickly, you know, we're bringing up the point that he can just play a normal game without Birthing Pod, and the reasons he's able to do that, you know, we went over his sideboard, more Wolfir Silverhearts, and that sort of thing. He has 4 Huntmasters, but he also has 4 Green Sun Zenith in his deck, so he can just play like a normal green deck. Obviously, you know, when he has Birthing Pod in play and he's activating it, then his deck is on steroids. Yeah. But if he is not Birthing Podding like he was last game, he is still able to just play normal Magic. But it might be difficult when he's going to 5 cards now. Yes.
Yeah, it is definitely way worse, I believe, for Hetrick's deck to mulligan than the average standard deck. Now, Birthing Pod can catch you up from there, but his deck is so much about like mixing and matching kind of different parts that you're way more likely to get this awkward hand that doesn't really go anywhere when you're on fewer cards, as opposed to a deck like Perales, which is just a lot more homogenous. His mulligans to 5 are likely to be a lot better.
And you can talk about how good Bonfire of the Damned is by itself because it is one of the best cards in the format, but it's even better when your opponent is mulliganing, and you know they're going to be even more reliant on their mana elves. And that's when the card just normally being cast is even more powerful.
And they don't even have the option of playing around it either, which is the other big thing.
Yeah, they just have to play their threats and, you know, hope that things work out their way. We have Geno starting off with just the turn 1 birds, and we've got a follow-up here of turn 2 Borderland Ranger, which will probably fetch out one of his mountains.
I would assume we don't need the third forest here. So.
I do not think we're going to need a third forest here. That's going to go get a mountain. That's going to turn on his red cards like Huntmaster, like Bonfire. Looking at Hetrick's hand, you see a Zealous Conscript, you see a Birthing Pod. I see a grip full of other red cards, and I believe a mountain as well.
Yeah, it looks like.
I can't tell if one of those cards is an Arc Trail, but if it is, it's going to be reasonable here. And he draws another Hinterland Harbor, which is clearly a little bit awkward.
I assume that is not a Birthing Pod, an Arc Trail in his hand, as he would have just. This is about the best spot you can imagine for casting it.
I see one of those cards is definitely Bonfire.
Yes.
So we'll see if that's going to be able to catch him up. The Hound of Gristlebrand, one of the more important cards in the mirror. Geno's going to swing in for 2. Hound of Gristlebrand is, of course, in play. It's passing back to Mr. Hetrick. Bird of Paradise is the draw. Any game plan for you this game, Patrick, as far as you can tell?
I'm not even sure. I mean, sir, I do not think that he can afford to pay 2 and cast Pod on an empty board. That doesn't seem like a recipe for success. I think he's almost just priced into casting his bird here.
I mean, Bonfire for 1 is no good.
Yeah.
Bonfire. I mean, if he draws Miracle Bonfire next turn for 2, the current board state makes it look okay. But I can't imagine just playing Birthing Potting passing.
I think he has to cast his bird.
I think he has to cast his bird.
I don't see a better. I mean, that play. All right, we're gonna dial up the pod.
All right, he disagrees with us.
That's fine.
But that's fine.
Wasn't the first time. Won't be the last.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of that today, and that's okay. That's okay. So Geno's, of course, in an enviable spot right now. He's got a solid board presence. We can't really get a good look at his hand, but I mean, all things considered, he's very ahead on the board as is. That we don't even need to see his hand. Any follow-up to this is going to be fairly good. And that's not bad at all. Crushing Vines is going to take care of that Birthing Pod, which, for lack of a better term, is basically a time walk.
Yep.
And Hetrick dealt himself 2 points of damage, so that's a pretty crushing turn. Do you like the puns?
Not that one so much.
Okay, I'll work on it. Forest for Hetrick is a reasonable draw.
I mean, he still has a Bonfire draw here.
Bonfire's always live. I mean, he has enough lands to do it and make it relevant. I see.
He has 2 Bonfires in his hand.
2 Bonfires in his hand.
So I guess we actually don't have that draw.
Well, he's got 3. He's got 3 total.
3 after board.
He's going to Bonfire for 1 to take care of the elf. Maybe slow him down a little bit. Try to keep him off of Wolfear Silverheart. Or Zenith for Wolfear Silverheart, which is, I think that's a pretty, all things considered, I think that plays perfectly fine.
Yeah, you're not gonna. You can't just not cast your spells in this spot. You're behind on the board. You have a very small window. You just have to cast what you can cast for any sort of value.
And Geno has a Kessig Wolf run. It's gonna make our friend Mr. Hound of Gristlebrand more dangerous down the road. I mean, dangerous enough. It's dangerous enough now. Strangerroot Geist. We're gonna come on in for looks to be 8. And that, I mean, the Strangerroot Geist, he was already in bad shape. His Bonfire was already not going to be great, but it's even worse now because of 2 undying creatures in play. A Miracle 1 isn't anything special, and you see that he drew a forest there. So this game, for all intents and purposes, is probably over.
Yeah, he can Bonfire for 2, or cast his Zealous Conscripts and not do anything, or concede, which is what he ultimately decided upon.
So, I mean, that game was more or less decided by Michael's mulligans. Didn't really get to play the game of Magic that he wanted to play. I didn't really see any sideboard cards drawn by Geno. I guess he did draw Crushing Vines. He drew the Crushing Vines for the Birthing Pod, which was not terribly relevant, but it doesn't hurt that he had it.
Yeah, certainly that was an ideal spot of Hetrick going turn 1 pass, turn 2 pass, turn 3 pay 2 pod. That's about the best game plan you can script for having your artifact destruction matter.
Yeah, sure. I don't think that much changed on the sideboard. Now, I know that you said, I guess some things may change that I haven't really taken into account. I know that you said you may want to sideboard Outranker on the draw.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that it's very likely to assist you only when there's something wrong with Hetrick's draw, because his deck is so good at clogging up the ground.
Okay.
But I'm no expert when it comes to the red-green versus blue-red-green pod matchup, but my instincts are that that Ranker is pretty dubious on the draw.
Well, oddly enough, I kind of am an expert in that
Sort
area.
of an aficionado.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy the red-green deck online. And, you know, what I have found is that, you know, Geno's deck list is much different than mine. But the same sort of role assessment and ideas apply. Bonfire is very, very important in the mirror, which won't surprise you at all. And when you're on the draw, you know, you want to try to get your mana dorks out there as much as you can and make your Miracle Bonfire as powerful as you can to clear the board up. Now, he has some cards in his deck that are different than what I typically play. Hound of Gristlebrand is very, very powerful in green mirrors. Double Strike and Undying and the interaction with Kessig Wolfrun, all very, very powerful things.
Yeah.
So he has some things going on his end that typical red-green decks don't have. Overall, I would agree with your point of boarding out Rancor because a lot of things are going to have to go right for Rancor to be as good as it can possibly be. Much better card on the play than the draw.
So from Hetrick's perspective, you had mentioned the 3 art trails in the sideboard. What are your thoughts on that versus Pillar of Flame? They're slightly different cards, obviously, but they are for similar matchups.
Yes. It's interesting because in this matchup, Art Trail is going to be able to kill, you know, ideally, best case scenario, the copy of Huntmaster of the Fells plus a bird.
Yeah.
Which is really, really good. But at the same time, Pillar of Flame is more flexible because it only costs 1 mana, and it can just take care of a bird, take care of his mana accelerant right away, and then you can just push far ahead. Art Trail costing 2 mana is actually fairly relevant versus the 1 mana.
It's also better against Undying creatures.
Yes.
Another big thing.
And with Geno's deck list where he has 3 Huntmasters after sideboard and a grip full of Strangleroot Geist, Pillar would be better.
Yep.
It's fairly close actually. On you know, it depends on what you want to accomplish. You know, on what you're looking to do. You know, if Michael feels his deck is fairly good against zombies, for example, you know, then he doesn't think that he needs Pillar of Flame to take care of a card like Gravecrawler, or take care of Draw's Messenger, that sort of thing. I think the cards are very, very close and very similar, as you said. But I think that, you know, playing Art Trail just is saying, in Michael's point of view, that he wants to be better off against green, and he's okay being a little bit lesser against a deck like zombies.
Yeah.
The mana difference, though, you know, the difference between 1 and 2 mana may not seem like a lot, but it's a pretty big difference, especially in a deck like this that's going to maximize its mana every turn with Birthing Pod and casting its threats. So it looks like we're both keeping 7, and Mr. Hetrick is off with a Birds of Paradise.
So his hand looks like a bunch of red cards, a forest, and a blue-green land. So if this bird gets killed, he might not be able to cast very much. And he just ripped a pod, so...
All right, so 18. I see that those look like Hellriders in his hand to me. Is what I think
I believe there was an art trail. There's a bonfire.
There's a bonfire. I think there was another pod there. I'm almost positive one of those cards is Hellrider, if not both of the other red cards.
You gotta kill that bird. You gotta kill that bird.
Yeah, that bird needs to die if you can kill it.
You got a bonfire or something. You gotta.
Hey, you can't be too proud to bonfire for 1. I know it's a mythic. I know the card's like $25. Don't be too proud to kill that Bird of Paradise right now. Because things are going to get out of control if that bird stays alive. Excuse me.
And I actually think Hetrick's hand might actually go to trash if the bird dies too. I think he's basically all in on this thing.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Not a bad play.
I don't hate it. Let's see what he draws. Strangleroot Geist. Now I know that Michael has a Viridian Corruptor in his starting 60. Not sure if he left it in or not.
You have to imagine it's reasonable insurance. It's also potentially an answer to an Undying creature as well. Or no, that interaction doesn't work.
That interaction does not work, no.
No, but it is still an out to sorts, and it's reasonable to assume that Perales has a few in his deck somewhere.
Now things get a little bit tough here, and I'm interested to see your line of play here because you know the threat of a sword is imminent on the table.
Yep.
He just drew a Strangleroot Geist, which he can sacrifice. He can sacrifice the Birthing Pod, get his Strangleroot Geist back as a 3/2, and he can get Borderland Ranger to ensure that he hits his land drop, or he can get Viridian Corruptor if it's still in his deck to take care of the sword. Which pathway would you take?
I think that I would probably just get the sword off the table because just the risk of the upside on Perales' turn, if that sword sticks, is just, I believe it's just too high.
Okay.
So I guess we'll find out if the Corruptor's still in his deck right now.
Because Borderland Ranger is going to kind of turn on his hand. Okay. And I assume he's going to search for a mountain. It's going to turn on his hand. Now, of course, Bonfire is still very, very, very good here.
As it is wont to be.
He's going to get to play his mountain. He's getting closer to turning his hand on. And he's going to get in for 3 points of damage here as well with the Strangeroo Geist with the Undying, the +1/+1 counter on it. Go to Geno's turn. Is it Bonfire o'clock? Not.
No, doesn't look like a Bonfire.
So now it's decision-making time for Geno, and I wish we had more information on what his hand was. But I mean, the first thing that he's going to have to decide is if it's sword time. Okay.
This is a freebie. He's going to throw away a spare birthing pod, I guess.
All right, so Birthing Pod's going to bite it. What Geno doesn't know is that he is going to be under a lot of pressure this turn if that bird doesn't die. Because now the Hell Rider is going to come through, Zenith for 1, which means he's light on land.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't play a land before attacking with a sword, which is something of a giveaway that he was without a third land drop. So,
and now the pressure is going to be on now because not only does Hetrick have Bonfire the Damned in his hand, but he also has Hell Rider. And I mean, looking at Hell Rider this turn, assuming he doesn't draw a land, it's going to be 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 11 points of damage, and he's at 17. And that's assuming that he doesn't draw a land.
Yeah.
Because if he does draw a land, he can play Hell Rider, turn that bird into another Strangeroo Geist, and get in for even more damage.
Yeah. And then he's also a little bit better covered against
Bonfire.
Yeah. All right, drew an Arch Trail.
I mean, that's a fine draw. It's probably going to shore up the later parts of this game, just that 2 points of damage over to Geno. But I think that Hell Rider is going to come into play this turn, and we're just going to put him under the gun.
I mean, do you think there's an argument here for just going Arch Trail your bird and you for 2, and pod my bird into a Strangeroo Geist? Because it gives you like a ton of insurance against Bonfire off the top.
I don't think that would have been bad. He's going to pod this away. So maybe now we see the Corruptor, or maybe now we just see another Borderland Ranger for a mountain.
I mean, if he has the Corruptor in his deck too, then this plays much better because he gets to blow up the sword and then... Okay, yeah, this is much better.
And now he's going to Archer both the guys, sure. And then he's just too far behind, sure.
This play also seems fine.
Both the things are going to die, yeah. That's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah. Michael Hetrick, not bad at all. It's not even Miracle Bonfire's off now. And he also, his sword is gone. Both his mana dorks are gone.
Yeah. He stalled on lands.
He stalled on lands. That's going to happen. And now Hell Rider's going to come to play to take care of things. So
this is a wrap.
Archer, I guess, was a better draw than we gave it credit for. He had a lot of lines available to him. I think he drew. Yeah, he drew. He drew Bonfire this turn, and he's just like, I don't need it. All right. But as Hetrick goes through the steps of what he's going to do this turn, between pod activations, casting a Bonfire or Hell Rider, what these matches typically come down to, Patrick, as you saw, it's all about the mana accelerants. Yes. And if they can stay in play, and if they do stay in play, then you can accelerate to your large threats too quickly. But it also shows just how powerful of a card Birthing Pod is when it goes unchecked for 1, or as we have found in the first in this game, all it takes is 2 turns.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that like I said, I believe bringing in the artifact removal is a little dodgy, just because there's no guarantee that this even, if you were to draw a Grudge in any of these turns, it wouldn't have even mattered particularly much,
Yeah. I mean, casting a Grudge is, it's killing his Birthing Pod, it's killing one of the threats, but it's also taking up his entire turn.
Yeah.
And
it would have been good on the turn where he had Sword Equip hit him on tap. That turn it would have been good, but any other turn of the game it would have been. It would have been a 1-for-1 and trade off his turn at best.
Yeah.
And then we're in a position here where it just doesn't even matter.
And so now on Hetrick's turn, he could have cast Hell Rider absolutely, but he just wants to shore up the game. make sure that Geno is basically can't do anything. So he just sacrifices Viridian Corruptor to Birthing Pod, got Huntmaster. Huntmaster flips because no spells were cast, shoots down the bird, shoots Geno for 2. And Geno is still in the same terrible situation of I need to draw lands, my bonfires are off, there's nothing I can really do to get myself out of this predicament.
So, all right.
Borderland Ranger, you're a little late.
Yeah, a little late to the party here. Is Hellrider just lethal from here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess, yeah, it's lethal.
Looks to be lethal, right? Especially because the 4/4 tramples. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah. Hellrider will do it in.
Lethal plus change.
It's interesting that he boarded these in. I didn't expect him to do that. How do you feel about that, just overall? Hellrider coming in this sort of matchup.
I mean, it's a little bizarre, but it's possible that he has other utility cards that he simply doesn't want in his deck. Like the 2 Phantasmal Images are probably a little dodgy against a deck that has Keswick Wolf run.
Okay.
And it's possible he just has enough cards that are in that sort of space that they're just upgrades over other weird bolts he would never want to get. Like, it's possible he doesn't want the Metamorph if the guy's bringing in artifact removal. Like, there's enough pieces that you could reasonably want to cut that they're just... And there's a concession.
Yeah, there's a concession. And what he did that turn is he just cast Hellrider, sacrificed his Borderland Ranger to get Metamorph to copy his Hellrider in for God knows how much damage and take care of the game. So, Michael Hetrick, Ship It Holla on Magic Online, is 1-0 with his Rugpod deck, the deck that he loves playing. He got second place at the Indianapolis Invitational with it. He has lost in the finals of a Magic Online PTQ. He is very, very adept with this deck. Doesn't surprise me at all to see him here with it this weekend.
Yeah, no, and his lines on some of his lines there were showing that he was thinking, 2, 3, 4 turns ahead about what his progression was going to be with his pods and